Welcome back to Epilogues and Unpacking of the weekly Haftorah. You are listening to Rabbi Yaakov Trump. We're going to focus on the Haftorah of Parshas Pinchas, but not Pinchas every year, because this Haftorah is only read on Parshas Pinchas when it is not in the 3 weeks. If it is in the 3 weeks, we actually read the Haftorah of Parshas Matos, the first of the 3 de Paranusa, the 3 Haftorahs of punishment, which is read on Parshas Pinchas. Let's take a look at this Haftorah. If it were to be on Parshas Pinchas, not in the 3 weeks, we hear it is from Melachim Aleph, Perek Yud Ches Pasuk Mem Vav to the Perek Yud Tes Pasuk Chaf Aleph. A very trying moment in the life of Eliyahu Hanavi. Just to put things into context and to appreciate our Parsha and Haftarah. This story begins immediately after the very famous previous episode. Most people are aware of the previous part of the story, which is the showdown at Har Carmel, in which Eliyahu Hanavi, after 3 years of drought, challenges the prophets of Baal, who are under the employ of Izebel, the wife of Achav, to a public duel in which he succeeds in the most incredible way. Fire comes down from heaven on Har Carmel in the north of Israel. People all declare Hashem Hu Elokim, God is mighty. And now we hear the follow-up. What happens after this episode? The first thing we hear is that Eliyahu decides to run in front of Achav to Israel, which is fascinating. Here we hear that he escorts or runs in front of the king back to Israel. The Meforshim try to struggle with why is this. Rashi says he's giving kavod lamalchus, he's giving honor to the king. And the Chidah says it's actually a remez to the future Geula, where sometimes unlikely leaders may be the heralders of great Geula, of great redemption in Israel, and Eliyahu is going to be the herald. He's going to be the one who's coming just before these leaders, perhaps even leaders as complicated as Achav himself. When you hear about the next day, that's when Perek Yud Tes picks up. We then hear that Izebel, Achav tells his wife Izebel everything that happened, the showdown, how Eliyahu killed the prophets by the sword on Har Carmel, and Izebel then sends a message to Eliyahu. She sends a malach, and she says, "You should understand, ki ko'es machar asimes nafshecha kenefesh achad mehem. I'm going to take your life like one of their lives. In other words, you killed my prophets, I will kill you tomorrow." So Eliyahu, in his fear, immediately gets up and he runs to the desert, and he goes down to the south, and he settles underneath a rotem, under a juniper bush, and he asks to die. Vayishal es nafsho lamos, and he says, "Rav ata Hashem kach nafshi, take my soul." Before going further, just a few basic points on this is, why is it that Izebel would hunt him down? Surely he has just proved in a demonstrable fashion that God is all-powerful. So the Barbanel points out that really paganism doesn't operate that way. Paganism operates in a world of chaos, where this force overcomes that force, and another force overcomes the force that just was the successor. And ultimately, it's a world of dog eat dog. It's a world of different powers fighting and vying for each other for the great power. So what Izebel is essentially saying to Eliyahu is, you may have succeeded yesterday. It may have been true that yesterday your powers overcame my powers, but tomorrow my power will kill yours, because in my system it's not monotheism. It doesn't all add up. You had your day, but I'll have my day tomorrow as well, which is why she takes her time. She doesn't seem to be in a rush to go and issue the death threat to Eliyahu Hanavi. She's quite happy doing it at her own leisure as well. So she's not moved by this experience. Again, even the most incredible miracles don't seem to change the hardened pagan. Why did she wait until the next day? So the Chidah actually says that it was really an angel. So she was moving at her own pace, but it was really an angel who ran out to Eliyahu ahead of time and gave him the warning in order that he could escape, and escape he did. Why does the Tanakh tell us that he settled underneath this rotem, this juniper bush? It is interesting to notice it's a type of a broom bush, which is found in Israel all over in the south, in the Negev. Why is it that we have to hear about this detail? So it actually has a very interesting botanical application, and that is that the roots of the rotem, when burnt, actually are a slow burning fuel, which means to say that they are very useful in the sense that you can use them as a coal, and you can even bury them for days and they will still be found to be hot many days later. And that's why when in Tehillim, as an example, when describing the words of those who are slanderous, they are called gachalei resomim, literally the coals of the rotem bush. And this is an example of chitzei giborim shononim. This is the types of the sharp-mouthed or tongued giborim, which refers to those who speak lashon hara, those who use their language in a terrible way, and that's why, metaphorically speaking, he is going to the juniper bush under which he feels that he is the burning embers of the falsehood that he's being accused of is going to carry on burning, and that's the metaphor for this as well. Why is he asked to die? Is he asking to be killed? So the Ralbag says no, he's not asking to die. This is the end of a 3-year drought. There's no food to be had, and he's on the street, so there's nothing to eat. So he's going to die. The Radak says no, he's actually just tired. He says, Hashem, I've done what I need to do. I represented you, and now again, I'm being persecuted by expressing your will in this world. I'd rather die than live with this as well. That's what he's saying over here. So what happens? So he goes to sleep under the rotem, and a malach wakes him up and says, go and eat, and he gives him an ugas ritzafim etzapachas maim, this cake which is on the coals, and a gourd of water, and that's what he does. He has this, and then the malach says, no, you need to eat more because you're going on a long journey. You're going to go for 40 days and 40 nights to Har HaElokim, the mountain of God, Chorev, which is Sinai. This is the only other time in Tanakh where there's a return to Har Sinai. So he goes there, he goes to Har Sinai, he enters into a cave, and Hashem says, Malach pa Eliyahu, why are you here? He engages in a conversation with Eliyahu. Eliyahu says the line, Kanoi kinesi la Hashem Elokai tzavakos, I've done my zealotry in the name of Hashem, the God of the legions, Ki ozur b'schav b'nei Yisrael, the nation of Israel have left your covenant, es mizbechosecha t'harei, so they destroyed your altars, es neviecha hargu bar charev, they killed your prophets. This is all referring to what's been happening in the northern and larger kingdom of Israel. Vayivaser ani levadi, and now I am abandoned in my quest, vayivakshu es nafshi lekachta, and they are trying to kill me, which is why I'm here. So Hashem then turns to him and he says, look, go out and stand on the mountain. And a ruach, a wind, a large wind came in front of him, one which could uproot mountains and destroy rocks. Hashem then says, Lo baruach Hashem. I'm not found in the wind. And then HaKadosh Baruch Hu brought about a huge rash, this earthquake. And after the earthquake, there was a fire. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, I'm not in the rash, I'm not in the fire. I'm not in the earthquake, I'm not in the fire. And then there was a call to Mamadaka, a very small and still sound. And when Eliyahu heard this, he gets terrified. He covers himself with his cloak, and he runs back to the entrance of the cave, and the voice of Hashem passes. And he says, what are you doing here, Eliyahu? And Eliyahu responds with exactly the same words. He goes on to describe the zealotry that he had done for the nation of Israel, who were not living up to his word. At which point in time, HaKadosh Baruch Hu then turns to him and says to him, you know what, Eliyahu, you're going to go back to the desert, and you're going to go and anoint 3 people. You're going to first anoint Machazael as the new king of Aram, number 1. Then you're going to anoint Yehu ben Nimshi as the king over Israel in the place of Achav in his dynasty. And number 3, you're going to anoint Elisha as the prophet in your place as well. So these are 3 new anointings. It's almost like his job is being taken. All the jobs are being taken. The king of Aram, the king of Israel, and the prophet of Israel all being replaced. And finally, we hear the end of the Haftorah that he goes to Elisha, and he goes and he finds this Elisha ben Shaphat. He was busy plowing with a whole team of oxen, and Eliyahu comes and puts his cloak upon him, his aderes on Elisha, and Elisha comes with him and wants to leave. Before he leaves, he wants to tell his parents that he's leaving, Eliyahu takes him along, and he leaves behind his life and his family and his money. It's worthwhile noting, not the topic of right now because of time, but Elisha was an extremely rich person, and he left all of this behind because of the ideas, because of the personality of Eliyahu Hanavi, and this is a huge sacrifice he makes in terms of his personal life because of the realm of ideals that he follows afterwards, becomes a formidable and incredible leader of Israel as being a Talmud and ultimately the prophet following Eliyahu. A few basics just to ponder in understanding this Haftorah, because there's so much that is going on, but there's a few parallels which you should be aware of. First of all, the basic parallel, which is why this is the Haftorah Parshas Pinchas, is there's a lot of parallels between Eliyahu and Pinchas. So the language of zealotry, when Moshe Rabbeinu tells Pinchas, the actual language is the same. When Pinchas, by killing Zimri and Cosby, avenged my zealotry. That's the same words of Eliyahu, who says Kanoi Kinesi. Number 2 is longevity. We know the Radak says that when it comes down to that really that Pinchas and Eliyahu are the same person. Pinchas lived for many years. Eliyahu never really died. He went up to heaven in a fiery chariot as well. And finally, another idea is that invisibility. We know that there is an element we will perhaps discuss in a moment of that Pinchas was able to be invisible, and also Eliyahu being able to be invisible to escape the clutches of Izebel as well. So interesting parallels between Eliyahu and Pinchas. We'll have to think to ourselves what they mean. But before getting there, there's another set of parallels which are also important, and that is this whole episode in our Haftorah, in Perek Yotes in Melachim Aleph, is very much parallel to Moshe Rabbeinu being on the mountain of Hashem, especially when we read Parshas Kisisa after the Chet HaEgel. So, for instance, we hear about the 40 days and 40 nights without food. Both Eliyahu and Moshe Rabbeinu experienced that. We hear about the revelation in the cave, where Moshe Rabbeinu asks to see the presence of Hashem, and he is hidden in the Nikra Satzur. Here, Eliyahu is in the Ma'ara. It's the same idea. We also hear about Hashem passing by and their faces being covered, both by Eliyahu and by Moshe Rabbeinu. Eliyahu takes the veil, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu cloaks Moshe Rabbeinu. Almost parallel languages over here as well. So the question is why? What is going on over here? How do we put this all together? So there's a very fascinating thesis which is expressed in the Al-Shech HaKodesh, and the Al-Shech HaKodesh makes the following observations, which are very powerful. He says, number one is really the Eliyahu is the personality of Pinchas. He's a continuation of Pinchas. Pinchas had the merit of very long life, which then ultimately is that is why he is Eliyahu. We don't hear about where Eliyahu was born. We don't hear about too much about him. He just appears on the scene. That's because he really is Pinchas as well. Pinchas attained kahuna, his priesthood, through his zealotry for the truth. Pinchas was also able to become invisible, which we see at the beginning of Sefer Yoshua, when he was a spy to the city of Yericho. We hear that it's not necessary to hide both spies, and Chazal tell us that's because Pinchas was one of those spies and he was able to become invisible. What that means, says the Al-Shech, is that his essence was more spiritual than it was physical, which is why he was not susceptible to death, nor at certain times vision either. His personality was inwards, so much so that he could supersede the norms and the trappings of this world as well. That's why Ezel could not capture Eliyahu on the first day, because Eliyahu had, in a certain sense, disappeared. He was not able to be seen or accessed. This also explains why he returned to Sinai, to the Nikra Satzur, to Moshe Rabbeinu, which was the closest a human being could ever come to God. Eliyahu's comfort zone was in the closest places to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. His physical existence was seen as a baggage, was seen as something which was too heavy and difficult to live with. That's why he needs food as a reminder. The Malach needs to remind him to eat food, because eating food is simply something about the external trappings of his body, but it's not really who he is as well. It's an action which human beings need, which Eliyahu is very much far away from. This also explains why Hashem explains to Eliyahu that he is not found in overt expressions of power in this world. He is found in subtlety and silence. What essentially Hashem was doing was he was reprimanding for Eliyahu for believing that humanity needed drastic actions of correction. However, Eliyahu repeats the same phrase he does before and after the conversation and display of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, indicating that ultimately Eliyahu is not compatible with this world. Eliyahu is essentially saying that I am not able to live in a world where people are so wayward, where people are so immoral, where people are so corrupt and intellectually dishonest with themselves, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu, kanoi kinesi, I did what you wanted, I know what the truth is, and they're not living with truth. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in a certain sense, is saying, you're right, the complex and broken world of humanity is so difficult that perhaps a person like you, who lives so close to the truth, who lives so far away from the complexities and the immorality of your day-to-day life, then yes, and perhaps you're not the right prophet, which is why he needs to appoint an Elisha in his place, because you can't deal with such a people because they are so difficult and so immoral and so incorrect. And that's ultimately what is happening over here. And that is perhaps why it is, as the Midrash describes, that Eliyahu has to visit every bris. Why is that? Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in a certain sense, was saying to Eliyahu, you may be right that the people of Israel have many, many, many problems. However, note that in the future, the nation of Israel will perform the bris milah throughout all the most difficult of times, whether it be in the cemeteries in Russia and the USSR, to avoid the KGB finding them, whether it be in Nazi Germany in the death camps, people would still perform bris milah. And you, Eliyahu, are going to attend every bris milah as a testimony to the fact that despite all the stiff-neckedness of this nation, they ultimately are my nation and have committed themselves to such. This is a perspective and understanding the aftermath of Har Carmel, understanding the complexity of Eliyahu as a prophet. Have a wonderful, meaningful day and a meaningful Shabbos.